for the last year, I have been thinking about the worst things that carbon and methane emissions can do to us, that could wreck our country and other countries around the world and create migrations and loss of life like we have never seen. I have identified 3 of these dire consequences, and I have painted each one of them under the series called Dire Consequences, Send in the Clowns. As I worked on these paintings, I'm happy to say NASA, Stanford University, SRI International, and some other experts, scientists, academics, have helped me. On this show, Dr. Bob Green, who is an atmospheric physicist, was one of the advisors who helped influence me how I made the 3 dire consequences paintings. And he is going to help me decode this particular painting. This one is called Gone with the Wind is the Electric Grid. Gone with the wind is the electric grid, not just in the northwest of the United States, but the entire United States and the world. I sat back, thought about what carbon emissions could do, and they can possibly, in the near future, knock down the whole grid. Bob, thank you for coming on here.
And thank you for having me.
And is it a little outlandish that I should try to interpret carbon emissions knocking down the electric grid?
I don't think it's outlandish at all. I think it's just a matter of time, and I think we have to react better than we have up to this point. I don't think we're serious yet about climate change.
Okay, so would you tell our audience what is carbon emissions and methane emissions doing that would lead to storms more powerful and more frequent than any we have ever seen?
Well, what happens with, okay, these are called greenhouse gases. CO2 and methane go into the upper atmosphere, and what they do there is they provide this, well, the greenhouse effect. They essentially put a layer that allows the sun to come in, but not to reflect out into space again. So it holds in the heat, okay, and as a result, we're gradually increasing the temperature of the planet. Now, the reason that this is significant and would produce storms that might affect the grid is as we continue to heat up the atmosphere, we create instabilities. And instabilities have a way of creating their own more instabilities, if you will.
Okay, shall we come over here? And I want to say in my thinking, and my thinking is a little more narrow, but I was thinking about the oceans, all the oceans around the world, and that as we emit more and more carbon and methane emissions, the oceans are absorbing energy.
Right.
And it's happening today. We can see the storms are getting stronger and stronger. And I said to myself, as we keep emitting more and more emissions, the oceans are getting more and more energy, the storms will get bigger and bigger and more frequent. That's what I had.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about, by the way, I don't like all the focus on climate change because it's 2 steps removed from the problem. The problem is really the emission of the gases and the organizations and people that emit them. So I was imagining, you wonder what this is?
It looks like a smokestack to me.
Okay, and I was imagining smokestacks give off carbon emissions, and you know, we do have storms today, and more storms today, but I think sooner or later there's going to be a series of storms, a whole new generation that will be stronger, as I said before, and sooner or later they're going to hit us.
Yeah.
And I guess you know what this is.
Right, that's some sort of utility pole.
Yeah,
yeah.
And they're going to break the utility poles.
Yeah.
And
the reason that, okay, people might not appreciate this because this is a sort of a slow-moving accident or disaster that's coming at us. You know, the train is on the track and it's coming this way. We just can't tell how fast it's going. To give you an analogy of how you should think of this, we're heating the planet and we're heating the oceans. And as a result, okay, have you ever put a pot of water on the stove, you know, and put the heat under it? Okay, first you get a bubble here and a bubble there, and then you get more bubbles and more bubbles. That's what we're gradually doing to the atmosphere now. And that's why you'll get more and more storms, and they will be more severe.
Okay, good. And, you know, a painting or book or anything on the concept of the collapse of the electric grid is a very, very complicated, complex topic. So to simplify it, for me, an artist, to be able to articulate it, I decided that one pole, and some sundry things, but mostly one pole would represent the entire electric grid. And if that pole breaks, and I show it how it breaks, what causes it,
Right.
I have gone far, in my opinion, helping people appreciate what can happen to the grid worldwide.
Right.
Okay, before I go any, oh, go ahead. You want to
Yeah,
say something?
what is this supposed to represent here?
Oh, that I was starting to make a building,
Okay.
and I never quite finished.
Okay, okay.
But you'd like to ask some more questions?
Yeah, well, obviously you make the tie-in with Congress here. Tell me about that.
Okay, well, I'm a person who has great respect for a president of the United States, and I have a great appreciation for how Obama has done everything he can do to leverage the Clean Air Act to protect our environment, to slow carbon emissions, increase energy efficiency, etc. You know, he's working completely with the Clean Air Act, and there's a limit to what he can do or anyone can do leveraging one act. And it's really Congress. In my opinion, Congress is the most important organization in the world that can do anything serious to significantly stop the knockdown of the worldwide electric grid and the other two dire consequences that I painted. And maybe I just mention them real quickly and I come back to Congress. The other two was methane joins carbon emissions to boil the planet. You know, the methane's coming out now, and the more carbon, as you will agree, heats the planet, the more the methane comes out, and the two join together, and they make more heat. You know, methane joins carbon emissions to join to boil the planet. And the second one is carbon emissions, and I know you're an expert in ocean acidification. Carbon emissions join with seawater to create ocean acidification.
Right. Do you want me to explain that a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. When CO2, goes into water, it forms carbonic acid. Okay. That acid is changing the pH. We're changing the chemistry of the oceans. Now, having more acid in the oceans makes it more difficult for the marine mammals and crustaceans and so forth to form their shells and to form their skeletons, and the fish. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So let me say, in that painting I did, and where you're going leads to the depth of the entire ocean seafood chain.
Yeah, and essentially we're putting ourselves in the position where we could lose the entire ocean, all the oceans, and lose 20% of our protein source for the planet.
Like mid-century?
Could happen before if we don't get on our horses here and get moving.
So I would start answering your question. Congress is the most powerful organization.
Right.
It's the only one that can initiate really new, powerful strategies, policies to help make sure those three, destroying the ocean, seafood, boiling the planet, and the collapse of the grid and other things. They're the only one that can fund it. And I prefer to focus on the dire consequences of carbon and methane emissions, get right close to the problem, as opposed to climate change. So because I feel, and we all know, Congress is basically broken, and there's another thing about it is controlled to a good extent, not completely, by the fossil fuel industry, the people and organizations that sprue out all this harmful gases. So I put Congress as a broken entity right with a foundation of being a smokestack. I want to make a point. Okay, and I'd like to step back for a second. And it is Congress that is also holding up this fossil fuel industry. And this is a leg And as you pointed out to me earlier, it's a trick knee or something. It's Congress that's keeping those organizations in power. So I tend to believe that once the electric grid starts to break in different parts of the world is going to start to get dark, and things are going to get all messed up, and people are suddenly going to start to fall out of whatever the structure of life they have. Lots and lots of problems. And I tend to think the nation and other nations will be diminished in importance in this world as everyone struggles to survive and prosper.
Right.
But at that point, I'd like you to make some comments or ask some questions about this.
Okay, well, I'm not clear on the imagery up here, what it is you're trying to do. Could you fill me in?
About the imagery.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to say I'm really, thank you, really proud and impressed with my 10-year-old granddaughter, Isabella. She came in and took a look at this painting. She's the first person to see this, and she says, "Grandpa, this imagery is from your painting over the couch in the living room." And I just thought, it's amazing that a 10-year-old could make that connection. Right. These are cave people that were painted 20,000 years ago in the Lascaux caves in France. Yeah. And I am touched by cave art. And I just gave an event in an organization called the Nature Gallery, where there was a tremendous amount of fossil and so I like that. So,
well, where did you come up with the idea for the Dire Consequences series, and in particular, you know, the three themes that you've done in the three works?
I came up with it like this. At the request of NASA Ames executive, I made a painting, 24-foot painting, to bring attention to the need for all of us to practice more sustainable energy and other sustainable things. That's a solution, sustainability. And then I decided to make another solution, a 24-foot painting called Resilience of America. And I think of that as another solution because, you know, there is this feeling, this zeitgeist all around about resilience. You know, sustainability only can save us part of the way.
Right.
It's not enough. And then I was thinking, what comes next? Resilience, and that
right.
is preparing for the hits and preparing to be able to spring back. Right. And I said to myself, wait a second, Michael, I just gave the world two solutions, you know, at least on canvas, you know, that they all know I did that. But the emissions are still increasing at a faster rate than ever. Yes. And I thought, wait a second, why don't I do something that tries to shake up the world? Let me try to give them a picture. And I thought 3 dire consequences would be manageable.
And what about the subtitle, Send in the Clowns?
Why does the title of this series have dire consequences, Send in the Clowns? Let's see. I think it's an important phrase, yeah. And it sends a message. But I once listened to the man who wrote a song, the lyrics for that song, and when he was asked, he didn't answer the question. Yeah. I have my reasons for using the phrase, but I want to know what you,
well,
when you think of dire consequences.
Okay, particularly Send in the Clowns has a couple imagery things for me. One is that the people in Congress are the clowns right now. They're not facing up to these issues. There's a second level of clowns to me, and that's a lot of environmentalists who think that wind and solar are going to be the answers for us. What they don't realize is that wind and solar generate a lot of CO2. They only operate part of the time, and so they're backed up by by gas-fired plants. We're doing more and more fracking to get that gas. We're emitting more and more methane through that fracking and through leaks. So we're actually not necessarily reaching the goals that they want to attain. Our goals should be zero carbon, and that's why you want to go to nuclear. because that's a zero carbon solution.
Okay. So,
Okay.
so I do want to ask you, and first of all, I know you and I know a bunch of your buddies who have the ability to step back and take a look at the entire energy, how much
Right.
energy the United States and the world needs this year and out for the next 10 years. I know you guys can do that. I've seen
Yes.
fellas do that. And when you sit back and you recognize that energy needs are going to keep growing and growing and growing, and you know, we have oil in it, we have
Right.
sustainability, we have energy efficiency and a lot of other solutions, but do we need nuclear? And
Yes.
if we do,
The,
where does it fit in?
Okay. To start with, the way we're going, even with rapid expansion of wind and solar, we're still going to be producing more CO2 at mid-century than we are now. It just cannot catch up. The fossil fuel industry is much more entrenched than they realize. Also, with respect to ocean acidification, we have to act now. If we don't act now, the dire consequences are going to happen with respect to the ocean. And what we need to do is we have to stop all CO2. And to do that, we need to really ramp up with nuclear. And I would ramp up with existing nuclear, and I would ramp up with molten salt reactors, which were proven in the 60s at Oak Ridge National Labs. And we should do that in a big way. And there are things we can do to stabilize the ocean to some extent. Now you're going to ask me, well, what's that do for the atmosphere? The only thing it does is we stop producing CO2. We don't make it any worse by putting more CO2 in the atmosphere. And we also cut down on the amount of gas-fired plants and the methane associated with it.
Okay, I would like to make a statement and then ask you one more question, and then
Okay.
I'm going to thank you for your contribution here. First of all, you ran for president of the United States in what year?
In 2012, in the New Hampshire primary.
And why did you do that?
Because I was watching the early debates, and I said, these guys don't have a clue about energy. And I felt it was necessary for my son and daughter-in-law, and if they ever had any kids, for any progeny, to try to give them a better future. I knew a better way, and I felt that we had to do it.
Last question. Don Quixote
Yes.
woke up one day and he decided to fight the great challenges of his time. He thought they were monsters. He got
Right.
a few things mixed up, but his spirit was such that he wanted to go out and fight. Now I've noticed you're an advocate of a lot of environmental issues, including the role of nuclear, etc. What does tilting at windmills mean to you?
If you want to tilt at windmills, try running on an energy platform in New Hampshire in a primary, because you wouldn't believe the number of people who are lined up against you. You've got all the fossil fuel industries are lined up against you. The utilities are lined up against you because they want to just keep turning the crank and generating the money. They don't want to make changes. They don't want to take a new approach.
What does it mean to you?
What does it mean to me?
Are you out there tilting?
Yes. Oh, I tilt every day.
All right.
Because to me, that's the only way we're going to progress in life, is to start breaking some of the boundaries that we need to break, and to face up and to face up to our real responsibilities to the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having
your
me.
help.
Yep.
Hi. Hi.
Michael,
Hi, Jonathan.
good to see you.
I could sit down for a minute. Thank you
Please.
for coming here. And Jonathan, you know, I've known you for about 20 years, and I remember you were an assistant conductor in a orchestra, a
That's
symphony
correct. That's
in
correct.
San Francisco, and you were involved in an Emmy Award winning something. And I could just tell me a little bit, remind me a little bit about it, especially for our audience.
Well, when we met those years ago, I was the associate conductor of the Chamber Symphony of San Francisco, which is the Performing Arts Orchestra of San Francisco, which is the orchestra of the San Francisco Ballet. And that was my association when we met. And the Emmy award-winning show that you're referring to is a concept I came up with when I was assistant to Sergio Commissione in the Baltimore Symphony, called Symphony Music is Really Fun. And at that time, the Smurfs were very big in television.
really?
So that was the acronym for what that is.
Okay, so you know I created a series of 3 paintings that articulate 3 of the most deadly consequences of carbon and methane emissions, and to some extent they're underreported. And I added the phrase, "Send in the clowns," to that title. Dire consequences, send in the clowns. Now, I'm wondering, when you see the term "send in the clowns," what does that mean to you?
Well, to me, besides the song that everybody knows of Stephen Sondheim from A Little Night Music, Send in the Clowns, clowns really throughout the ages have been symbols, in a certain sense, of regret, of foolishness, of disaster. Well, if you go to a circus and something goes wrong during a performance, everybody screams, "Send in the clowns." That's what happens during a performance when there's a disaster. So while they may be smiling and they may be appearing to be funny, it's really sort of a disaster kind of thing. And it's interesting because when the musical A Little Night Music was originally written in the early 70s, everybody had questions about, to Sondheim, Stephen Sondheim, what's this title about? And
Did he ever?
He did. He actually did. But it was interesting because they actually asked, Frank Sinatra, "What does it mean to you?" And Sinatra said, "You meet a chick, you get involved, she leaves you, send in the clowns." I mean, that was kind of, you're always a disaster, something happens, you send in the clowns. In Sondheim's case, what he said was, years later, he said, "I suppose, really, in retrospect, I could have really called this song Send in the Fools." That's what he said. It's clowns being for the fools. And it is a song really about a lot of regret, about things that had happened many, many years before, and then it comes to be borne out, and there's nothing that really can be done. And it's almost in the same way what is going on with this particular issue, that for years and years, certain things have been done, and the relationship between human beings and this planet is to such a state that regret, foreboding, maybe next year, as he says at the end, which we keep doing maybe next year and maybe next year until the time that we won't have a next year or a maybe anymore. So again, if you read all of that, and if disaster is about clowns and sending them in, this is,
all right.
That's one thing. But the fool is something else.
All right. That's interesting. I have learned something, and I want to thank you for all of that. I just want to ask you, and I'd appreciate one short answer. I know you're so into music and everything, but I know you're also the president. You run a design company. Just briefly tell us the name and what it's the mission of it.
Well, I do own a design company, and we design and we manufacture in our plant in Santa Rosa very high-end custom residential cabinetry, the Clyde Design Group.
Okay. And if somebody wanted to contact you, you are in the Oakland Hills, or where is your?
We are all around. We are all around.
All right.
And they can go to the website at www.clydegroup.com.
Thank you
Michael,
very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Okay. Hi. I'm Michael Killen again, and I want to share that the next little gig I do is going to be in November, and it's going to be at St. Bede's Church. And it's going to be Michael Killen's art and music meets climate change. Carol, how are you?
I'm great, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And you are Carol Garston, and you are the owner of Nature Gallery in Los Altos, California. And you were kind to invite myself and a very, very important scientist, energy expert from SRI International, to give a little speech at your lovely gallery recently. And I'd like to know, you brought in close to 50 people, I think. I would like to know what contribution, primarily my buddy from SRI International, the scientist, and secondly me, just what did we do for the community? I think it was called Art Inspires Conversation of Global Energy Choices.
Well, Michael, it just so fits into the meetup that I started about 1.5 years ago, which is called Silicon Valley Nexus, Art, Science, and Technology. And so what we're trying to do with this meetup is get artists, scientists, and technology people to think out of the box and to realize that everything is really all connected. So when you and Rapu came to us with this idea for doing a talk for our meetup in my small, intimate gallery with a really interesting group of people, I thought, you know, we could really inspire people to start thinking about our energy policy choices and how art can affect how we see things and open up our minds to new choices.
Interesting. Now, a nature gallery, you know, I was not familiar with it, but it seemed to me you had a lot of geo pieces, would you call that? And you had fossils and maybe some cave art. And I think it was unfair what you did to me, because when I got up there and I could see the lights flickering, I could see all this lovely art that I really, really was impressed with.
Well, I moved my business from, originally I started my business 27 years ago in San Luis Obispo, and I moved to Palo Alto in 1994, and then to Los Altos 3.5 years ago to sell minerals and fossils from around the world. The reason is that I really feel like people need to get connected with how beautiful and how awesome our planet is, because then we can really realize why it's so important that we take care, you know, of it. So we can just, the awesome nature. And that's why it's such a great venue for having a talk like we had recently.
Yeah, and why I'm drawn to the art, the caveman and art from a long, long time ago, and from nature, is because for me, it gives me a chance to see where I am and where civilization has come from, and it helps me think of where it might be going. I have one more question. Either tell me the name of a couple of other meetups or your next one that you're going to have.
The next meetup we're going to have is going to be a professor from San Francisco, from UC University of San Francisco, who is a geologist, but also sees geology as work of art. And so again, that sort of ties in the whole thing about opening your eyes to the beauty and the awesome nature of our Earth, looking at these amazing specimens that are Jurassic period and putting things in perspective.
I don't know, we're going to have to end now, but I wish I had time to ask you how to get more information. But somebody should go to the web and look up Nature Gallery Los Altos.
It's www.nature-gallery.com.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Michael Killen. And I've had some wonderful guests tonight.